You've heard about AI for writing emails, right? Or making crazy art? Well, forget all that for a minute. Today we're talking about something different. An AI built to tackle one of the biggest challenges out there, the super complex, super messy world of scientific research. We're going to dive into a model called Intern S1 Pro.
All right, so here's the game plan. We'll start with the why, the big data problems scientists are up against. Then, we'll meet the AI designed to fix it. We'll see it in action, put it through its paces. After that, we'll peek under the hood to see how this thing actually works. And to wrap it all up, we'll ask the big question, what does this mean for the future of research?
Okay, let's dive right in. First things first, the scientist's data dilemma. Why even bother building a special AI just for science? Well, it all boils down to just how incredibly complicated modern research data really is.
Seriously, just take a second and think about it. When a scientist is in the lab, running an experiment, what kind of data are they actually looking at? I'll give you a hint, it's almost never a nice, clean spreadsheet.
Picture a scientist's workbench in your head. It's not all pristine and organized, right? No way. It's this chaotic jumble of stuff. You've got images from a microscope over here, raw data spitting out from a sensor over there, these super complex diagrams of molecules, signals that look like waveforms, and of course, a bunch of scribbled notes. The thing is, all of this stuff, it's all part of the same story. But trying to piece it all together, it's always been this total nightmare of juggling a dozen different tools for a dozen different data types.
And that is where our hero, if you will, enters the picture. This is the problem that Intern S1 Pro was built to solve. The whole idea is to create one single unified tool to handle all that chaos.
So what exactly is Intern S1 Pro? The official term is a multimodal scientific reasoning model. Now, multimodal, that's the magic word right there. All it means is that this AI can understand and process a whole bunch of different types of data at the same time. We're talking images, text, signals, molecular structures, you name it. No more jumping between different software. This thing is designed to see the entire scientific picture, all at once.
Okay, that all sounds fantastic on paper, right? But the real question is, does it actually work? Let's find out. It's time to put this AI assistant to the test and see what it can do.
All right, challenge number 1. We're starting in the world of chemical analysis.
So here's the setup. The AI was shown this image of a chemical structure and given a pretty straightforward command. Predict properties or suggest some synthesis routes for this chemical structure. And this is a perfect example of that multimodal magic. To answer this, the AI has to understand the image of the structure and the text of the question and then connect the two.
And the results? Honestly, pretty impressive. The model didn't just spit out an analysis. The first thing it did was correct a common mistake, pointing out that this structure isn't caffeine, which people often think it is. Then, it went on to give a really detailed, accurate breakdown of the actual chemical, talking about things like its solubility. That shows a much deeper level of understanding, right? It's not just matching patterns, it's actually reasoning.
Okay, that's one for one. Next up, let's switch gears. We're moving from a clean diagram to some messy real-world sensor data. Let's talk about spectroscopy.
So for this one, the AI got this image of an IR spectrum graph and was asked to identify the major functional groups. Now this is a completely different kind of task. It has to look at this graph with all its peaks and valleys and interpret what it means. It's a whole different skill set from just looking at a molecular drawing. And how did it do? Well, the verdict was that the analysis was spot on. It nailed it, correctly identifying the key chemical groups just by looking at the peaks on that graph. So yeah, 2 for 2. So far, so good.
Okay, so it can handle diagrams, it can handle graphs, but what about something even trickier? Let's talk about time series data, like a long, complicated signal from an ECG recording. This is a real test.
And this is where things get really interesting, because we see the model isn't perfect. On the first attempt, total failure. The model basically said, sorry, I can't view images directly, and couldn't process the ECG at all. But then, on a second try, after a re-upload, it had, well, partial success. It was smart enough to notice the image was low resolution, and it gave a very general but still relevant analysis. And you know what? That's actually a good thing to see. It shows us that these tools are incredibly powerful, but they're definitely still a work in progress.
So, you might be wondering, how in the world does this AI manage to do all of this? How does it handle all these different data types? Well, let's pop the hood and take a look at the secret sauce behind how it's built.
The first thing you need to know is just the mind-boggling scale of this thing. We're talking about a model with 1 trillion parameters. That is absolutely massive, one of the biggest AI models on the planet.
But here's the catch. If you had to fire up all 1 trillion of those parameters for every single simple question, it would be ridiculously slow and inefficient.
And that's where the genius of its design comes in. It uses a clever system called a mixture of experts, or MOE for short. Now, the best way to wrap your head around this is with an analogy. Imagine you run a huge consulting firm with 512 different experts, each a specialist in their own little niche. When a new project comes in, you don't call an all-hands meeting with all 512 people, right? That'd be chaos. Instead, a smart project manager looks at the problem and handpicks, say, the best 8 experts perfectly suited for that specific job. That's exactly what MOE does.
So here's the takeaway. Even though the model has a massive library of 1 trillion parameters to draw from, for any single task, it only activates about 22 billion of them. This makes it so much faster and more efficient than trying to run the whole thing at once, but you still get all the benefits of that huge, vast knowledge base.
So how does it handle all that messy data we talked about earlier? Well, it has 3 different front doors, or pathways, to get the information ready. For images, the data goes through something called a vision encoder that basically teaches the AI how to see. For text in those molecule diagrams, a tokenizer breaks everything down into a language the AI can understand. And finally, for that long, wavy time series data, it gets compressed and encoded to make it less unwieldy. All of this is like a prep station, getting the data ready before the main mixture of experts' brain even gets a look at it.
Okay, so we've looked at the problem, we've seen the AI in action, and we've peeked under the hood. Let's zoom out a little. What does all of this actually mean? What could a future with tools like this look like for scientists?
All right, let's boil it all down. What are the big things to remember here?
First, this isn't just another general-purpose AI, it's specifically built for science. That's a huge deal. Second, its multimodal power lets it handle the real-world mess of scientific data. Third, and this is crucial, it's open source. That means any researcher anywhere can use it, build on it, and make it better. And finally, it's ready to interact with other tools and APIs, which could make it a true digital lab assistant.
And that really brings us to the million-dollar question, doesn't it? When you look at its massive size, its clever design, and its laser focus on science, is this thing a genuine game changer that's going to supercharge scientific discovery? Or is it just another very impressive model in what's becoming a very crowded field? You know, the jury's still out on that one. But one thing's for sure, it points to a pretty wild and fascinating future for science.